Today on the Diz List, we discuss Nick's recent trip to Walt Disney World, Part 2, The Bad and the Ugly.
Welcome to the Diz List, the podcast that ranks everything in Walt Disney World. I'm Nick.
And I'm Rob, and welcome to episode 59, where we discuss Nick's recent trip to Walt Disney World, Part 2, The Bad and the Ugly.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is you don't need to sugarcoat everything, even if you're a Disney content creator. There were some bad things.
There were
some ugly things. But there were some really good things, too, and we talked about them last week. A couple of things, we were running a little long, so I didn't bring them up. I do want to mention some things we did that were really great and really fun, and I think everybody should do them and take the time to not rush through this. For the first time, I took the time to say, you know what? I'm going to sit and wait for Voices of Liberty. And we listened to Voices of Liberty in the American Pavilion, and let me tell you, it was worth sitting down in the air conditioning and watching. They were great singers. They were really cool people afterward. They hung out and talked to some people.
Really?
Yeah, so one of the singers came up to my kids, because like they invite you down to sit underneath the dome part because the acoustics are best there. And
I've seen the end of it inside. It was very good.
And so the kids were sitting down on the floor, closer to them, and at the end, they came up and started talking to them because they could tell, they're kind of getting into it or whatever. And one woman was like, "Oh, where are you from?" And my kids are like, "Oh, near Rochester, New York." "Oh, I have a friend up in Rochester. Make sure you tell everybody in Rochester we said hello." And they were talking to everybody. It was really cool.
That's cool.
So that was really fun. So I think that you should take the time to do those things and not just feel rushed. I think that's what makes Epcot so great. And the other thing I wanted to mention that I didn't talk about was, once again, we signed up to do FL Tours. FL Tours, for those of you who don't know or haven't heard us talk about them before, is a car service who is kind of word of mouth, really. I mean, I only found them from the Diz boards, but fltours.com. We are not sponsored by them. This is not an ad saying, "Hey, go and do this." They're the best because I've only experienced them, but I can tell you, they make it so that I don't necessarily need to look for anywhere else. We landed at 10:30. I had a text as soon as I switched off of airplane mode, that said, "Hey, I'm your driver. Let me know when you find out what your carousel is for your baggage." I texted, said, "Hey, we're at C49. No problem, meet you right there." Then it got changed where our baggage was. I was like, "Oop, correction. We just got moved to C50. Yeah, no problem." Guy stood next to us before our bags were out. He was standing next to us and he was like, No, you're not touching your bags." Grabbed our bags off the carousel, loaded them into his car.
That's cool.
Drove us on the way there, we had a stop at Publix, which is free with them. Now free is, it's
included in your
it's
price.
Included in your price. Stopped at Publix. He was like really accommodating. We usually only stop at Publix to get like beer or wine or stuff.
Case of water.
Well, no, because stuff that we can't necessarily get dropped off while we're not there.
Oh, right.
So just because I don't really want to go through like Publix with like go and do a full week's worth of grocery shopping for our DVC stay and then have to load that in the back of a car service. But so we went and did that, and he was telling us some stuff about the Brightline, the new is it Brightline?
Yeah, the train.
The train.
I think that's what it's called.
Yeah,
it sounds right to me.
We have that fiber optics company in the area that sounds very similar to that, so that's why I didn't want to. But anyway, we did that, and he was talking about about all the train stations and whatnot, and then the pickup guy, he called or he texted and said, "Hey, just want to confirm your time," and I was like, "Well, we'll actually be ready earlier than that." He's like, "No problem. I'll pick you up at 1 instead of 1:30.
Wow.
So it was great. We had more. That gave us more time in the airport, which allowed us to actually eat in the terminal. Not that like you're looking to eat in the terminal, but we also don't want to feel rushed. It allowed us to sit down and grab a bite before we left. So that was one really, really good. It was a really good choice to do that, I would recommend them to anybody. They're great at what they do, and the owner is really responsive to any emails or anything. And if your flight changes, you just send them a little quick note, and that's it's done with. It's a pricier option, right?
Yeah, and I thought you were going to get to the website. Start with the pricier option, then we'll describe how the website is a little different.
Yeah, so it's a pricier option. It's $235 without your tip. So in the end, you should be tipping probably 20%. They were great, so I actually tipped more than that. I gave each driver a little bit more than 20% then, and so they were great, and it was worth it. So $235 is obviously not cheap, but I feel a lot safer in one of those than I do in some of the Ubers that drive around or Lyfts.
Yeah,
and I feel as soon as my bags were off, they were in a car and we were going.
Yep.
It was not, get a bus and wait for the bus and wait for the mirrors or the sunshine flyer or whatever they're called now, connected.
Right.
Sunshine Connect.
Oh my gosh, Sunshine Seasons. I can't say that either.
Yeah.
Mirrors Connect. I don't know.
It was Mirrors Connect and Sunshine Flyer. Now I think it's like Sunshine Connect or something like that.
Yeah, they
either way
use
they
both
merged
names together. Yeah,
they merged and they're they're good. I'm sure of it, but and they're cheaper. But for the extra money, it's definitely nice to have a personal car service. So yeah, and Rob was talking about their website.
Yeah, and I've used it too. The website is, it's not bad, and there's nothing wrong with it at all. It's just when you look at the website, you may just go, is this legit? Is this real? So the bottom line is they didn't put like millions of dollars into their web development. It works exactly like it should. It doesn't look like a luxury website. It's fine.
They don't charge you up front.
Right.
So
that's true.
So that's why I was
that's important too.
You know what? I'll book this. The first time I did it, I was like, oh man, I'll book this, but I don't know. And then I figured, well, worst case scenario is they don't show up and I have to get a lift. That's the worst case scenario.
Right. Or rent a car.
Right.
If there's one available.
So legitimately, if you want to use a credit card or if you want to pay by check, you have to contact them in advance. I paid cash. It was great. And like I said, this is not an advertisement, but it's definitely something that is on the good side that I did want to mention.
Yep.
That I didn't.
I support this business too.
I didn't mention it last week, but they're great. So that's just another thing.
Well, I'm glad. I think, there was so much that we covered last time. I figured there's probably no way we would get to everything, but I'm glad you can add that stuff here in our part 2.
Yeah.
So I think that's perfect here.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to go over before we get to the halftime show?
I would love for everybody to continue following us over on Instagram and Twitter and all the things at DizListPod. You can also find us at www.patreon.com/DizListPod, where you can sign up to buy us basically a cup of coffee every month, and you'll get early access to new episodes as well as bonus content, or you can purchase individual bonus content episodes, possibly some other digital things, digital products that as we continue to develop our store over there. But other than that, I don't have a whole heck of a lot because I want to get to the bad and the ugly. So we're going to send it off to the halftime show that's this week, brought to you by Emily P. So Emily P, thank you so much for being a Patreon patron, and we look forward to continuing to bring you the quality content that you've been helping us to provide.
Cool. Thanks, Emily. Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere, and even earn money all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters. And here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or your computer. So no matter what your setup is like, you can start recording today. Then distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. And when you want to take conversations with your fans to the next level, Q&A and polls are the best way to get them talking. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in various ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome back to the Diz List. Today we're going to talk about my recent trip to Walt Disney World, and we're going to talk about the bad and the ugly. For full disclosure, at one point I texted Rob and I was like, I'm done with this place. He's like, that's going to be a little difficult running a Disney podcast if you're done with this place.
That was my response. I'm like, are we going to still be doing the podcast? So I guess it doesn't really matter if you haven't listened to part one. I don't think it's really going to be that important if you do one or the other, but
you could do them backwards. We can do the bad and the ugly, then the good, if you want to feel better about yourself.
Yeah. So maybe you want to do, well, I guess it depends. If you've already listened to part one, you can't go back and erase that part of your brain.
Yeah.
But for people that haven't, you stayed at the Contemporary Resort.
I did. I stayed at the Contemporary Resort. I stayed at Bay Lake Tower, actually, to be more specific.
So I figured we'd start with that just because I know you had a couple things that were not your favorite about Bay Lake Tower, if you want to start there.
Yeah, so I don't feel like the room was as upkept as it could be. So what I mean by that is like the doorstop was like, one of the doorstops was just like totally not smashed, but like it was one of these doorstops that like fits into the ground and just kind of like a rubber stop or whatever. But it was like clearly somebody threw the door open too hard and broke it, but didn't totally break it, just kind of like, and it's just hanging there. It's like hanging out like on the floor, just kind of wobbly. Oh. That's a small thing. Like it's a really small thing that's out of the way.
Yeah,
but that's just
when you're paying this kind of money.
It's just a general, the general feel of the room was I'm staying. Anybody who's listening to this podcast will know what I'm talking about if they have ever done what I'm about to say. I felt like I was staying in one of those beachfront condos in Myrtle Beach. That is just, it's technically a timeshare, but really it's a hotel, and it's not really well kept. The TV in the bedroom was like, looked like it had been struck by lightning as far as like the colors on it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. If you ever lived in a house or like back in the day, the CRT TVs that would get, if the lightning struck the house or something, it blew up the part of the colors on the TV, or somebody ran a magnet over it. So that was an issue. The grout in the tile in the stand-up shower in the master bath was like cracking and loose, and like would just the water pressure would actually wash it around. It was like floating in the, not floating, but like would get washed around in the shower. It was not good.
Weird.
There. The holder for the toilet paper was like twisted and broke. The washing machine, not washing machine, sorry, the dishwasher, like you couldn't close it without like pushing it so hard that the dishwasher would like rock back into its because it was no longer affixed to the cabinetry. These are all things I made guest services aware of, right? Because these are things as an owner of DVC you should tell them, because like you
pay dues for this.
Your dues are paying to fix this, and I think they just don't care right now because it's on the docket to get like a refurb.
Okay,
but just little things like that. There was a gap. Like when you took a shower in the stand-up shower, the shower door didn't. There was no magnet to like hold it closed, so it like would close, and then the hinges were such that it would like come back a little bit. So it was like the door was open, so like any backsplash off of the water would like just go out of the shower onto the floor. So you ended up with a wet shower mat. It was just it did not feel as deluxe as a deluxe resort should. Right down to like the pendant lights, and this would have driven you nuts because you're an art guy.
Yeah.
So they're these really modern square 3 pendants that are meant to be a square, then another square, then another square, except for it's a square. And the next one's tilted a little bit askew, and the next one's a different askew. Ugh. So it wasn't like it was purposeful, where it was like 90 degrees, 45 degrees, 90 degrees. It was like 90, and then 27 degrees, and then 33 degrees the other way. I tried, like, because it bothers me, because that was like my symmetry OCD was like not doing well.
You're like, I gotta fix this.
So I like stood on the bench and tried to like fix them, and they wouldn't. Like as soon as I would have them straight, they would just go right back to where they were.
Weird.
And it's not because they were supposed to. It's supposed to be that way. Just these little things, I feel like for the room weren't very deluxe feeling. Then I went to the DVC pool, and let me tell you, I would be embarrassed if that was my house, let alone a deluxe resort. The stairs to go up to the slide, which are steel and painted blue.
Oh, this stuck in my head. They were rusty?
Rusty.
Wow.
I'm talking like not a little.
Wow.
Like really rusty. And you could, it was so rusty, you could see where they had painted over the rust, how rust will bubble and then somebody, like I felt like I was at a used car dealership.
Ugh.
And like I'm pointing stuff out and they're like, oh no, you don't see what you're seeing. That's perfectly blue paint. No, it's not. It's rusty, and it's the structure to hold up the stairs to the slide. Which by the way, the stairs of the slide were rusty. Ugh. I was like, this is again something you see at a $120 a night hotel in Myrtle Beach, that's on the water.
Yep.
Not something you see at Disney at a deluxe resort. I will say that the main pool at the Contemporary was a little bit nicer. As far as the upkeep, not much.
Now you can use both.
There are 3 pools at Contemporary. We use 2 of the 3.
Okay.
There's the main pool at the Contemporary, a quiet pool at the Contemporary, and then there's a DVC only pool.
And that's the one you're talking about now.
That's the one that was absolutely atrocious and bad. The pool bar was good as far as like service there. They were nice. The cast members were great. At the DVC one, there was not really any entertainment, so to speak. Like there's typically recreation at those pools, but they had all the recreation at the main pool, which I know is a small issue. It's nothing major for people who aren't DVC, but for me it is. Like there's that. So now I have to walk from Bay Lake Tower all the way over to the main pool if I want my kids to be part of any recreation stuff.
So why don't you take this opportunity to tell that story about the person that came down to the pool and decided to be the DJ.
Oh my God.
Sub-question that I want you to touch on the end.
This is a theme.
What happens when, I won't give it away, when someone is doing something they shouldn't or bothering other people? What do you do? That's part 2. Part 1 is tell the story. Part 2 is see if you have an answer to that.
Yeah. So we're in the pool and there's this family. 3 generations, okay? I would say the patriarch of the family is maybe mid to late 50s. Okay? I would then say his children, his sons, were probably late 20s, early 30s.
Okay.
And they had kids that were, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Sure.
Okay? And they were doing everything like racing down the slide, which is obviously not allowed because you're not supposed to have more than one person on the slide at a time.
Right.
Then that turned, once they were warned and told not to do that.
By lifeguards.
Right.
Okay.
They then said, oh, okay. And then what they did was the patriarch, the grandfather, was up top pushing the kids down to see how fast they can go and then timing them.
Oh.
Which is, a lot of fun. So after I was I looked at my wife and was like, the entitlement of some people. He comes over. He's sitting like 2 chairs down, of course, because he has to be. It's like how I pick the wrong lane every time going into the park.
I've witnessed it.
So
Nick picks the wrong lane, and it's the one where it comes to grinds to a halt, the person right before him.
Yeah, that happened this time too. I was behind 4 different people 4 different times that did not have park reservations. And instead of pulling them to the side, the people are trying to explain to them why they couldn't get in that's a whole other thing. So this guy comes down, he's like 2 lounge chairs over from us, pulls out his Bose speaker, Bluetooth speaker. Now they're playing music at the pool. They're playing Disney music. And it's not like Disney sing-songy music like they were playing Hamilton, then they were playing like the pop versions. They were not playing
fun.
Like When You Wish Upon a Star on loop, which is fine. I don't have a problem if they do that, but I could understand if somebody's getting annoyed with that and wants to listen.
Right, you want something upbeat at the pool.
He turns on some Cuban or I don't even know. It was definitely Latin music. I don't know if it was salsa or what it was, but it was definitely a Latin music, which I'm fine with. I like that. If I'm at like the Caribbean resorts, or if I'm at Coronado Springs, or if I'm at a place where it fits the theming, or if there's no music playing. So now we've got two fighting speakers, because
that drives me nuts.
I'm not talking like he was way away from the speaker. We could barely hear the Disney speakers. I'm talking like the speaker is underneath the lifeguard's chair that I'm sitting behind.
Wow.
And this guy's 2 seats down with his bows fighting with it. It was awful. The entitlement of these people, and that's a theme for this trip, was the entitlement. That's part of the bad, was the entitlement I witnessed. I don't know what you do. I don't know what the answer is. I certainly wasn't going to talk to this guy because he was, I will describe him as a meathead. Okay. Sure. And you can all picture that person, right? I'm not talking about a guy, oh, you're just saying that because he, worked out and was muscly. No, this dude was a meathead because he clearly was the guy who was giving people swirlies in high school, right? He was just an overall kind of jerk. He was in front of me in line to get a drink at the pool bar and made a snide comment about them having Bud Light. Do with that what you will. The whole Bud Light boycott. To a bartender who's wearing a pride pin. And he made that comment. And I was like, this guy's something else, right? Wow. So I had already had enough of him. But that at that point in the trip, I was almost numb to it because of the entitlement that I had been witnessing the whole time. Which is a big part of my bad and ugly, is the entitlement I witnessed.
It's hard to let that stuff go. You're paying all this money, and then you have these people that just make your trip miserable, trying to make a point or trying to do what they want to do.
Right.
And being selfish, it ruins everybody else's trip too, and they don't care.
Yeah. Like, just everything from like pushing your way onto a ride to like, perfect example. So that in Guardians, you go right.
Yes, of course.
And so what I mean by that is in the last room, you want to be to the right side. And this door opens and you're going down this hallway. And that hallway's pretty narrow. And I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old with me, along with my wife. And like, you're not supposed to run, but you get in that hallway, you better run, because if you don't, you're going to get trampled, because without fail, there is some 32-year-old dude who just can't possibly be bothered to wait 30 seconds. He's going to get there before you.
You're not wrong.
And it's like that entitlement, the idea of like, well, what do you mean I don't get this discount at this stand? I get annual pass discounts everywhere. Well, I'm sorry, you don't get annual pass discounts at the food booths. If you were an annual pass holder for a long time, you would have known that, because the festival booths almost never give discounts. Like, complaining about that, complaining about when you poured my beer, there was too much head at the top of it. There's too much foam. It's like, no, that bottom line is the 12-ounce pour. I know this because I have friends in food and bev. So I know, like, you're supposed to have that much foam because
you're paying for this amount. Because
the bottom line there, where the foam ends, is the actual 12-ounce pour. Stuff like that. The entitlement of like parents in restaurants letting their kids run around. I'm not talking about at Chef Mickey's. Like, Chef Mickey's, your kid running around, okay, cool.
That's part of the experience.
It's the price of admission, right?
Yes.
At Narcoossee's and Citrico's, I don't expect to have to dodge your son or daughter while walking to my chair. I don't expect to have to worry about tripping over their iPad on the floor. I don't expect to have to speak louder because your son is watching a movie on his iPad full volume. Like, we have a friend who does that sometimes. Like, just will randomly start watching a video during lunch, and I'm like, what the heck, dude? Like, turn it down. You might be listening right now. But seriously, like these are kids who are they're parentless. They're parentless at this point, because mom and dad need to make sure they get their fancy meal in, and that's fine. But don't do it at the expense of other people.
Yeah.
So my kids are looking at me like, what is wrong with, like, my daughter was getting so angry at some of these kids. Like clenched fists, like looking at me like, these kids. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'm glad you're annoyed, because that tells me you recognize
yes.
that this is not the behavior you have.
Good.
But the entitlement during this trip that I saw was unparalleled.
Wow.
Now, I've seen angry people, right? I've seen people yell at cast members. This was different. Like, yelling at cast members, there's no room for it. We know that. I mean,
I know.
You've witnessed it.
I've witnessed it too. I felt so bad I put in a cast compliment for the poor girl.
Yeah, the way
who had to deal with getting screamed at for something that is not her fault, and they were breaking a rule and were mad because it was a rule.
Right. So it's the entitlement of like not the yelling, but just doing stuff that I'm like, and we're not talking, because this definitely was less this time. The whole my family's up there, that was less.
Yeah.
It was still happening, but it was certainly less, and it was more legitimate. Like the people I saw doing it were definitely more legitimate. But I'm talking about like entitlement, like sending one person to Hollywood Studios for early morning rope drop so they could be first in line, and then calling your entire party up.
Oh boy.
But karma has a funny way of working.
What happened?
Because when you're the one person waiting up front and we're going to be first in line, and I'm going to call my entire party up, all 5 of them, to be up front with me as the first person in Hollywood Studios for early morning rope drop, and you don't have park reservations, karma, my friend,
that's
bites you.
Funny.
And I laughed.
Really?
I audibly laughed as like they were being escorted back to guest services. Oh, you thought you were going to be number 1 in line, and now you're going back. So guess what? You can't skirt the system always. None of them. All 6 of the people, the person who was waiting and the 5 people who came up to join them, all of them did not have park reservations.
So folks listening, make sure you get your park reservations for the park.
Unless you're trying to skirt the rules, in which case I will laugh at you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't laugh at the family who was going to dinner in Epcot. I felt horrible for this. There was a family ahead of us in line. We were going to Epcot. It was our second time of the day in Epcot. So we had kind of went left and come back. And it was probably about 4:00. They were clearly going to dinner. They weren't dressed to walk around Epcot. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
They were dressed for dinner, and they didn't have park reservations. It was I think it was probably their first day on property, and they were doing a nice dinner at Epcot.
Yeah.
Good news is, there's a happy ending to the story, because later on, while I was in Epcot, I saw that same family walking to their reservation. So,
good.
So it's fine.
Good.
But the fact that it was happening to somebody, I was like, oh God, I hope that they have a park reservation, or I hope they didn't think that maybe they, I wasn't sure if maybe they had like a Magic Kingdom ticket that day, and then they thought they had park hoppers and they didn't, because that happens sometimes.
See, I don't want to get into a giant discussion about this, but it's so complicated.
Oh, that's part of the good and bad and ugly. Why not?
And I love this park, and I love most things about Disney, but it just makes it very difficult and inaccessible sometimes for new people, or if you're coming from a different country, if there's a language barrier, that's got to be so hard to come in and just expect you're gonna go right into the park. Yep. Maybe you don't know those things.
Well, I mean, I witnessed some of it again. We were in, I can't remember what pavilion we were in, but somebody was speaking like Spanish to the person behind the counter. It wasn't a pavilion. It was one of the festival booths. And the person clearly only spoke Spanish, the customer.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor cast member is trying their best, but like they can't explain to the person like what's, because they don't know what the person's saying. I don't know. It happened at Outer Rim. Luckily he could have gotten his kids, but so this family from Montreal was in Outer Rim. It's the lounge at Contemporary. And the father of the family, so it was like an older man and his adult children. And I recognized right away when he started talking that he was speaking not with a French, like France French, but it was definitely a Quebecois accent. So I recognized right away that he's from Quebec. He's either from Montreal or Quebec City or something, certainly northern part of Quebec. And the bartender has no clue what he's saying. So I at least can understand him and enough to translate.
A handful of French.
Yeah,
at least.
I'm not fluent anymore, but And Quebecois is totally different than like regular French. It's like franglais. It's like half French, half English.
Yeah.
And so, like, I kind of helped him out, order, and he just laughed, looked at me, and he's like, he held up his fingers very small, like making a gesture of how small. And he said English, and he just kind of showed how small he knows. And I was like, yeah, I can tell. But he was, that's a situation where if you don't have somebody there, it can be can be difficult, especially when you're talking about how complicated the parks can be. So the entitlement we've talked about. We've talked a little bit about some of the issues in my room. But there was an ugly situation too.
You mean like the wallpaper being banged up?
Oh no, I can get to that. I'll get to the upkeep of the park.
Sure.
But I said this. We're not talking about people yelling at cast members, right? I wasn't. This here though is a fight. It was as close to a fight as anybody in my family has witnessed at Disney.
Oh, geez.
Right. Luckily, it didn't turn into a fist fight. My wife and daughter decided they were going to go to the stage show for Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
I forget where my son and I were going to, but we went to go do something else. And I get a text, hey, we're going to be in such and such country. Meet us there. I was like, that was really quick. Like, what? And when I caught up with my wife, she's like, yeah, so one family was in a wheelchair and the other family was had a member in the wheelchair, and one wheelchair bumped into another, and then when they apologized, apparently that apology wasn't enough, so they started yelling and screaming.
Oh boy. And
then the person who had apologized started yelling and screaming back. So then the cast members evacuated the theater.
Well, you only evacuate the theater if it's going to be a threat of...
So they evacuated everybody, and apparently it spilled out into the outside the theater, and they're still yelling and screaming at each other that you ran into mine and you hurt me and you did this and look what you did to my wheelchair. And look, you know as well as I do, they cram as many people as they can in there.
I know.
And like,
it's not a huge theater either.
Nobody's trying to run into you. And I get it. You're upset. You're frustrated.
And you're hot.
Yeah. According to my wife, they apologized, and that's what set it off. Like, it wasn't a good enough apology or something. I don't even know. So
how do you get any better than that?
That's not even that's not really the entitlement thing. That's just turning into the whole like being a jerk. So we witnessed that.
That's a bummer.
But you did touch upon another one, the ugly of the lines and the queues and everything in general. The upkeep in the parks. It was dirty.
That's too bad. You had posted, what was it, Olaf meet and greet?
Olaf meet and greet
had like big old giant bashes and smashes in the walls.
Like just paint it, man. Paint it. It's not. It wasn't like it would be hard to do. Paint it. They had clearly just painted in the Imagination Pavilion because it smelled of paint. Not like they were pumping in new smells instead of a skunk. It was smell of paint, and it looked good. The Imagination Pavilion, the queues in there, and then outside of that, more of that pavilion was working than I've seen in a while.
Good.
But that was out of the ordinary. So the queue for Minnie and Mickey's Runaway Railway is still kind of like,
because it was essentially a wallpaper sticker, right? That people somehow found the seam and started peeling it off.
So there's that. There was the Olaf picture I posted. Just general dirt and just in general, like the cleanliness of things, like the dirt on the arms of the people mover, like where you would rest your arm, like from people just looked like months and months of sweaty people touching the arms there and like having it get nasty. The pool, like I mentioned, wasn't. I would be embarrassed by it. The Hollywood Studios wasn't too bad that I noticed, other than Mickey and Minnie's, and then Olaf. Like the rest of the area was fine. Magic Kingdom looks beat up.
That's too bad. That's actually very sad to me.
Yeah. The Toy Story Land needs to be shut down for 2 weeks, and they need to go through and replace every single piece of theming, because it has whatever study they did with the paint and the decals and all that stuff to figure out how it would hold up to the weather. It's reaching the end of its lifespan.
Oh boy.
It was just, and if that's, look.
And how old is it? 5 years?
It's 5 or 6, yeah. I don't know. So I don't know if it's part of the theming they wanted it to be. So like, okay, well, it's in Andy's backyard. It's supposed to look faded. But if that's the case, it would have been like that from the beginning, and it is not. It's
that's like a funny excuse for it to be faded or the stickers coming off.
Speak and spell or speak? The thing at the end.
Speak and spell.
Yeah. So that thing looked like you legitimately left your toy outside for like years. That's what it looks like right now. It is not in good shape. I like what they did with the Pixar Place or whatever where the Incredible stuff is. Yep, I really liked that part was nice. But man, Hollywood Studios had some issues there in Toy Story Land and in those queues. And then Magic Kingdom was just dirty all around, I thought. And then some of that had to do with entitled people too, because I saw somebody there's garbage cans every I forget what it is, like 30 feet or something.
Walt
like that.
made sure of that.
Yeah, well, apparently he needs to restudy how long people will walk to find a garbage can, because I witnessed people just throwing their stuff on the ground. So like those cast members are not there to pick up after you. It's like when I yell at kids in like the cafeteria at school, like these people, like I understand that somebody's going to clean up for you, but this isn't your house. Mom and dad aren't going to pick up after you, and they shouldn't pick up after you at home either, but they do.
Well, and that's why Disney doesn't sell gum, because Walt didn't want gum all over the place.
Well, it was all over the place. I saw some on the ground. I had to dodge some.
Yike.
I don't know if like the monorails are pumping in smells to make you feel like maybe they wanted me to feel at home. It smelled like farmland. And I don't mean
what?
I don't mean like freshly harvested hay. I mean, when they go through and spray, what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about spraying chemical fertilizers, the natural kind, if you know what I'm talking about.
Are you sure someone wasn't just changing a diaper?
The first time I got on, I looked around looking to see if there was like a farming family around, because it was the smell of. Look, we live in a very agricultural area, and so we know the smell of manure, and we also know the smell of I work on a farm, and therefore it's kind of seeped into my clothes. That is what the monorail smelled like the entire trip.
Weird.
Yeah, I was at first I thought I was going crazy, but it definitely was there. It definitely smelled that way.
That's strange.
So I'm not really sure what's going on with that. So yeah, the parks are not really well kept right now. Still fun, right? But the theming wise, it gets lost when everything's faded out. The plastic stuff's fine, but it's like the box, like the toy boxes and stuff like that in Hollywood Studio, or just the general grime on stuff like I said with the People Mover. Epcot wasn't as bad, because you're going in and out of pavilions, and I didn't notice anything there. I didn't not that I noticed anyway. And Animal Kingdom was immaculate. I mean, it looked every day we went in there, it looked like it. But part of that is too that I think they clean.
It's supposed to be.
I think they clean that so well though on purpose, so that like no animals that potentially could get, because there's so many animals there. Like they don't want anything to like blow. Like they don't want a candy wrapper blow into the like macaque enclosure or something like that. So, but yeah, it was definitely, there was some issues there with that.
So you would say it's noticeable versus last summer?
Drastically
different.
Yes. Hollywood Studios Toy Story Land was noticeable since last summer, and then Magic Kingdom, the general upkeep of the bathrooms and some of the rides and stuff was noticeable. Yes. I do think that.
See, and then people like you and I and people that don't have annual passes or go on the regular, we notice those things more. It's like when you go and see your mother, right?
Yep.
And your mother says, "Oh my gosh, look at your son. He's grown a ton," or your daughter's so much taller. We don't notice it because we are with them every day.
Correct.
My son's growing like a weed. He's almost as tall as me now.
Yeah, you become nose blind,
exactly.
But you become blind with your eyes, and you don't notice that it's gotten worse.
So when my relatives see you, it's why I think it's, we're the relative that doesn't get to see the grandchild, and Disney is the grandchild in this comparison.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, there are a couple of things I thought like all this would take is a pressure washer.
Yeah.
Like, and I understand that the parks are huge, but like if you do, like the walkway around the Odyssey Pavilion in Epcot, was noticeable as far as being grimy and just like mildewy, but it's always humid, right? So it's just like, okay, take a pressure washer and you do that. I understand there's a lot of walkways in Epcot, but you do that one. And then the next week you put it on a rotation, right? And maybe they do, and maybe I just caught them at the end of the rotation, but it wasn't great. And I think part of it's staffing, which leads me to another one of the issues, which was the theme of this trip, which was downtime. That's the other bad.
Oh, that's your biggie.
Yeah, it was.
I would say on your unofficial Diz list,
Oh yeah,
number one was downtime of the rides. For your number one unfortunate situation. Am I right in guessing that?
So I would say that downtime just is a general theme this summer. One of our friends who I'm not sure if she's listening, she definitely is a follower on Instagram and we talk quite frequently, but she's at Raising Mini Me's. Mini as in like Minnie Mouse. Me's, MES, because her daughters are her mini me's, I think is why she calls it that. But anyway, she works for Touring Plans. She does some stuff with their data, and she does some stuff with posting on their blogs. And she's a numbers-driven individual, so I enjoy her posts. And she posted that wait times are up to, or the capacity lost due to downtime is up to 5.3% of the capacity was lost during July, which accounts to over a day and a half of all the parks being closed.
Wow.
That would be like closing down Disney World for a day and a half. That's how much capacity they lost during the month of July. That's up. And she said, a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, stuff happens. Like it's normal, but it's not. It's up 1 point something percent. Well, when you're like, oh, it's only up 1% or so. Yeah. But that's 20% more than it was last year.
Right. It's up. That doesn't mean it's normal. If it were the same, it'd be normal.
It's up 1/5 as high as it was last year. That's crazy. It's increased that much. And part of it, I think, is because of staffing. So I will tell you that here's a perfect example. We rope dropped Rise. I know I tell people don't go where the people are, go where they're not. We wanted to get Rise done, and I don't want to pay the money because I don't think it's that great of a ride. I think it's a good ride. I don't think it's so great I want to spend for an individual lightning lane. So we rope dropped. We are like literally around the corner from the loading room. Like we're going into the first pre-show, whatever. And they come on and they say it's been delayed. And then it's delayed again. And then it's has been suspended. Oof. And you are going to so follow, basically what you're walking out of the ride at this point. And they're going to tap your band and give you a lightning lane. Now, my big issue with this is it never went up, right?
Yeah, and you wasted your
early
rope drop time.
Right. My early entry rope drop time was completely gone at that point. Now I'm rope dropping with everybody else.
Yep, that's a bummer.
But they never even brought the ride up, which tells me they didn't even test it, right? It was down. If it was down at the very beginning, it was down. They didn't test it till we were in the ride, in the line. Like no one got on from early morning. No one. So like I had somebody reach out when I posted on my story that I was like, this is what happens when you early entry rope drop Rise and is broken down. And they replied, I can remember that they were a former cast member. We used to start testing Rise at 4 a.m.
Yeah, you and I were texting about that too when you told me. I said, why don't they test those earlier? And that was your answer. You're like, I think it's a staffing issue.
I think it is because this person said, we used to test Rise. When I was in Hollywood Studios, they would start testing Rise at 4 a.m.
That sounds reasonable.
And let me tell you, there's no way they tested Rise that day because it never went up. Did not go up that morning.
Wow.
It wasn't running when we got there. And then, so they gave us the lightning lane. And I'm thinking to myself, not only is this an issue for me, but it's an issue for Disney. They're losing money because when they give out those lightning lanes, they don't just come out of thin air. They come out of their supply.
Yeah.
Well, they no longer can sell that many lightning lanes because they don't have enough capacity. It was beyond crazy to me that they ended up having to give away, essentially, to my family alone, $80 worth of stuff.
Wow.
Because they couldn't be bothered to pay somebody to be there to test.
See,
and
that doesn't make any sense, because if you take the total amount of money that it would cost to staff to bring people in to test versus the amount of money that people are losing, and I'm not even a numbers guy, you are, and I understand that math doesn't work out.
Yeah, there were easily 300 to 400 people in queue.
There you go.
At $20 a pop that they just gave away.
Right. Versus how much would it cost? I couldn't even really guess.
Like, I get $8,000 is nothing for them.
Yeah.
I get that's a drop in the bucket. But $8,000...
Maybe that's the cost to pay the staff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's certainly enough to pay the cast member to be there at 8 or at 4 in the morning to test the bride.
Right.
Make sure it's up and running. And this was a theme, okay? Test track. My son and I we didn't get to do test track because we got all the way into the design room. We designed our car and it shut down. So we said to the designer, and the lady says, well, this is a computer issue, so we're not really sure how long it'll be. This isn't a weather issue. Okay. So this was a computer issue. Sounds like suspiciously to me like we're probably not going to get on this. So we left.
Reset. That's what the tech people always tell us. Yeah. Just do a hard reset.
Have you tried unplugging it and plugging it back in? Yes, Alan, I have. So
that seems like a perfect name for a tech guy.
It does, right?
Yeah.
Or Grimace.
You didn't see the Barbie movie, did you?
No.
Oh, okay. There's a character that's Ken's sidekick named Alan.
Okay.
So I thought that's where you came up with that.
Yeah, probably. So I Rob is dying over here. I left and talked to guest relations, and they were really great. They said, hey, sure, we'll give you a fast pass or a lightning lane. You can go back to anything you want to. So I asked my son, where do you want to go? I asked my daughter, where do you want to go? Do you guys want to do Frozen? Do you guys want to do Test Track?
Can you do Guardians of the Galaxy?
It was everything.
Doesn't count.
And so they all were like, well, no, we waited for Test Track. Let's do Test Track. So we finish our lunch. We go all the way back to Test Track. And what do we do? We get in line. We get all the way up to the front. And it starts raining. And you know what happens when Test Track rains? It's closed. So then I go to guest relations. And I'm standing in the rain because the umbrella only covers the guest relations people. So I'm standing in the water running down into my sneakers. Because at this point I was like, you guys go in. I'm not even going to change. I'm just going to quickly get this taken care of. The guy's like, Test Track's not down. I'm like, well,
what?
You might want to tell the people in there that it's not down because they just kicked me out of line. No, it's not down. I was like, it's down. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I used my lightning lane that I had, like, that they gave me, and I've tapped in, and once I got up there, it shut down. So he's like, let me call the team leader over there. So he calls the team leader, and they're like, yeah, it's down. And he's like, well, you're supposed to let guest relations know. And like he hangs up, looks at me, he's like, you're right. He's like, I don't know what the heck they're doing.
Wow.
So like these are just little things that add up. And that day I had had enough. I was like, screw this. I am done. It just was so frustrating that was what we had to deal with. Was downtime. It took me 40 minutes to get from the stretching room to the end of Haunted Mansion that one day.
That's crazy.
It was like 5 feet, stop for 3 minutes. 5 feet, stop for 3 minutes. It was a lot of downtime, and then it got better. It did. Like, Animal Kingdom was great. Honestly, we made the best out of what we could at Epcot, and traipsed through the rain. I posted on the story of like the rain that day, and we were like just walking through it.
Yeah.
And we just sucked it up. The kids had 2 pairs of sneakers, and we just dried ours out that night with like the hair dryer in the room, and it was good. We laughed about it afterward, but in that moment, man, I texted you. I was like, I'm done with it. I can't do this. The downtime is ridiculous. It was definitely a theme early on in the trip for me.
And I felt bad for you, but I also was happy to hear that things got better the further on in your trip.
Yeah, I would love to tell you that my kids enjoyed Rock and Roller Coaster this year, but I can't because I've heard, and this was told to me from Rob from Ear Scouts, that Rock and Roller Coaster is really nice right now because they went in and they took care of all the neon lights. They went in and repainted all and fixed the black lights in there, so everything's popping better.
Wow, good.
So it's really nice. He's like, it really is nice in there now. Huh. I couldn't tell you because Rock and Roller Coaster was closed the entire day I was there, and it wasn't just one day. It was like 2 or 3 days in a row.
That's a bummer.
Pirates was down for one of the days I was there. Pirates. Pirates doesn't go down.
Does Touring Plans have data on their website for which rides go down percentage of the time? See, that's interesting to me.
I don't know if it's on their website, like super easily accessible, but the same woman I was talking about, she definitely posts blogs, and she definitely posts stuff on her Instagram. So at Raising Mini Me's is where you can find those, and she does have like what rides are the most downtime and what percentage of the time they're down.
That's really interesting.
There's no shockers that are up that are on there. She also does the Genie Plus 101s on Touring Plans.
Oh, yeah. She does a great job.
She does.
I've watched all of those.
Yeah, so if you're looking to stack, she's somebody to follow about that.
Yeah.
If you're looking to not stack but play the Genie slots, obviously you go to Ear Scouts. So both of them are valid strategies, but she's pretty
those
good.
videos are great. So if she's listening, good work. I really enjoyed those videos.
Yeah, she is very good. So
okay. Let me check my list here and make sure that we covered everything. So, Magic Kingdom, you talked about a couple things there.
Yeah.
Epcot, Hollywood Studios, Animal Kingdom.
Character interactions. I wanted to talk about that.
All right.
So my meals were all good. Character interactions at character meals were not.
Really?
They were rushed. And when I say rushed, I mean like it felt like they did not want kids to get up and give them hugs and take pictures with them.
Really? That's very different than what
with
they've
the
done.
exception of Chef Mickey's. Chef Mickey's was very good. Tusker House, which prior to this trip I would have said is my favorite character dining experience, and then second would have been Garden Grill. Tusker House was woefully underwhelming.
That's a bummer.
We were done eating and we hadn't even met all the characters yet. That's how slow it was. And
it's
then
Mickey, Minnie, Donald, and Daisy there?
Yes. Mickey, not Minnie. Mickey, Donald, Goofy, Daisy.
Okay.
No Minnie. It was just so weird. They were like, they'd come over, put their arms around the kids, take a picture, and go. And I felt rushed. We had our check ready to go. In Tusker House, the first time we went, first 2 times I was there, they were like, take your time, see the characters multiple times.
Yeah, you loved it. You're you speak very highly about that.
So I don't know if it's just been like a directive has been changed or something. Topolino's food, phenomenal. Great breakfast food. A little pricey, but great breakfast food. Like I had a steak and eggs that was amazing. And I don't know where they're getting their eggs. I suspect that whatever they're using egg yolks for somewhere in the kitchen, they're saving the whites and adding them to the eggs because I was supposed to get like a steak and 2 eggs.
Yeah.
And they were the thickest egg whites I've had. I mean, it was like a massive serve. I couldn't eat it all. I could not eat my entire meal.
Wow.
For breakfast. It was ridiculous. It was really, really good. All the food was really good. Characters, super cute. Super rushed.
That's too bad. It seems to be
almost like if you asked for autographs, we weren't because we don't ask, like autographs are like to collect them all, right? You've already got Minnie, you've already got Mickey, you've already got you got the Fab Five.
Yeah.
So we weren't asking for autographs, but I felt like there were, like if we had been, it would have been like inconveniencing them.
That's too bad.
So I don't know that character dining is for us anymore.
Well, and it may be, your kids are getting older too. Maybe they don't want to.
Oh, Steakhouse. Sorry, I keep thinking of this stuff. Food-wise, Steakhouse 71. Supposed to be really nice, right?
Yeah.
It's in the Contemporary. It took over for the
Yeah,
Wave.
did you eat there? You didn't even mention that.
Steakhouse. So we got Steakhouse 71 to go because we came back from one of the parks and needed to do something, and we're like, hey, we'll go eat here. My son got a steak that was just awful.
Oh, no.
It was awful. It was supposed to be a filet mignon. I looked at it. I cook a lot. I smoke a lot of meat. I grill a lot of meat. And I also will buy bigger pieces of meat and butcher it myself because it's cheaper. They did not give him a filet mignon. It was very clearly the end cut. Like very clearly the end of the tenderloin. I don't care what anybody says. I know what it looks like. The basically the seam at the top end of the it was not well trimmed. There was grizzle on it. It's a fillet. It should not be like that. Now, granted, it was a $38 fillet versus a $59 fillet at most places.
Good point.
But it was so tough that like he couldn't cut it with a knife. It was that tough. And I tried eating it and I was like, this is not good.
Now,
buddy.
what cutlery do they give you to go?
Well, I mean, they give you plastic stuff, but we were staying in a DVC, so we had steak knives because we have a full kitchen.
Yeah. Well, what does your average person do if they do takeout and
they get
have
plastic.
Like
I don't know. They would have to eat it like a lollipop, I guess. I don't know.
I guess, or scissors. Can you? I've never even thought of that till just now. Can you cut steak with sharp scissors? I don't know.
It was not good, and multiple. So we had multiple meals from there, and we didn't have multiple meals from there. We got multiple dishes. My wife had a salad. That was okay. It's hard to screw up a salad. I forget what my daughter got. Wasn't like it's Steakhouse 71. It's like supposed to be a good place to go. It's not. Yeah, it was not great. So I would not recommend Steakhouse 71. So that was my only bad dining experience, I would say. Other than Contempo Cafe, but Contempo Cafe is not supposed to be like amazing. So.
Well, knowing all these things is really important, and I try to look at these as tips for what I'm going to be doing in the future. So if I'm looking with my wife to rent DVC, maybe I'll pause before renting at the Contemporary until those rooms are refurbished. Now, didn't they refurbish like the main hotel part and they made it Incredibles? Is that right?
Yeah, but that's so the hotel side of things and then like the DVC side of things generally aren't on the same schedule.
Sure.
The exception would be they did the poly rooms kind of at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only a soft goods refurb, which means they're just going in and redoing some of the stuff. But like you saw our poly room last year, it was immaculate.
Yeah, it was perfect.
I suspect they will be putting in one of the Murphy bed style pull downs instead of the current pull out couch in the one bedrooms and possibly in the studios as well. But yeah, look, like you said, we need to report the good and the bad. There was a lot of good. I talked about how the characters at breakfast weren't great. The characters in the parks were amazing. Mm-hmm. We saw a lot of them. I saw Clarabelle Cow.
Yeah.
Like
you sent a lot of pictures of ones that I haven't seen in the park.
I met Gideon.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
And it's a different version of Gideon.
Yeah.
Did we post that? I can't remember.
I did post it. Yeah. I didn't post a side by side with your picture. I have that somewhere though.
It's just interesting to see, and it doesn't matter whether I'm in it or not, but there's a photo of me from when I met Gideon when I was really young, but just seeing the way that the faces of the characters have changed. And they've done that for Mickey and everybody else, but I don't think Mickey's changed that much. I think they finally found one that works. I'm getting in the weeds here, but that stuff's always interesting to me.
Yeah, so in-park characters were great. Honestly, weather, it was super hot, don't get me wrong, but like it was bearable. We had one day that didn't rain at all.
Wow, that's rare.
I think it was Friday before we left. It didn't rain at all that day. And blue skies, just enough clouds to keep the sun from really baking you. It was nice. So there were plenty of good things. But you have to know certain things. Like, for instance, don't act like an entitled jerk when you go.
Yeah.
Or
if you have someone in your party who is, set them straight.
Be prepared that, the reality is you might encounter those people. Be prepared for it. My best advice is ignore them because you never know how they're going to react in Disney right now.
Yeah.
I would also want to add that transportation at Disney was, even though I mentioned how the monorail kind of smelled a little bit like a farm, it was very good. The buses were constantly running. We didn't have to wait very long for anything.
Pretty clean.
Buses were clean. Good. We didn't ride them late at night, but the buses were clean.
Good.
Lyft, I will say, Lyft and Uber prices have gone up a little bit, but that's like with anything else. And then just a reminder, make sure you're tipping your Lyft and Uber people. They get like hardly any of your fare. I always tip like 25% in an Uber.
Do too.
In an Uber because it's like I know how little they get, and the reality is it's way cheaper than me getting a minivan down there.
And it's so easy to do when your ride is finished and you exit the vehicle.
Yep.
They ask how your ride was and do you want a tip, and it's super easy.
Yeah. 5 stars and
it.
give them a tip. Yep. But there was a lot of good things that happened on this trip, and I think it's only fair that Rob and I also discuss some of the negatives, because a lot of times there are a lot of creators who, and I'm not pointing fingers, but there's a lot of creators who only talk about the good and don't talk about the bad. Don't talk about the times that they got stuck in line, or they got evacuated from a showroom, or they got, they didn't get to do what they wanted to do. And I think part of it is they're locals, right? And so they leave, and then they come back the next day. For me, I don't get to go back till next year.
This is your one trek every year.
And I get that it is different for me as a DVC owner, because I know I can, like, okay, we didn't ride Test Track, we'll get it next year.
Yeah.
We didn't get Rock and Roller Coaster, we'll get it next year. But the fact that we still only get to do it every year, I as an adult am okay with that. But I have kids with me. My children, it's a little bit harder to explain to them why they, like, if they had missed their favorite ride, that would have been a little bit different. Like, if I was going and my Magic Kingdom day was today and that was it, and my kids couldn't ride Haunted Mansion, that would be different.
Yeah.
And so
I agree with that.
I think it's important to be aware that, like, sometimes when you're watching creators who are always talking about the good, they're there all the time, and so they might be in there just experiencing. I had 0 problems with walking around the parks. I had 0 problems with going into the pavilions. I had 0 problems with shopping. Well, that's what they're doing. My food was excellent. That's what a lot of the creators are doing, and that's fine. But if you go and act as a vacationer, I think you do see some things differently. And there are some negatives, and some of that is preventable on Disney, some of it is not. You can't prevent bad people, you can't prevent jerks. You can prevent, rides not being tested until 8:30 in the morning. That you can prevent. So overall, it was a great trip. I had a blast. My kids had a blast. We're looking forward to next year going to Animal Kingdom Lodge, I think is what our plan is right now.
Great.
We want to stay there and do more of the animal stuff, because let me tell you, after doing the Rhinos tour, we're hooked. Check us out on Patreon, www.patreon.com/DizListPod for a mini about that experience, because it was amazing.
Cool.
But it's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, and tomorrow's just a list away.
Tune in next time, and we'll see you real soon.